Two people work at the same company. Same department, same manager, same starting salary. The first one says yes to everything. Covers shifts. Takes on extra work without complaint. Never argues in meetings. Everyone describes this person the same way, so nice. The second one pushes back in meetings. Says no when the workload is unfair. Leaves on time. People describe this person as difficult. 18 months later, the difficult one gets promoted. The nice one gets handed even more work, because, in the manager's own words, I know I can count on them. If that story makes you uncomfortable, it should. Because somewhere in your life, you might be the nice one. And what you are about to learn is that niceness, the kind that never says no, is not actually a personality trait. It is a strategy your brain built a long time ago to survive something. The problem is, the strategy never got the memo that you grew up. You have been praised for it your whole life. People call you kind. People call you easy to get along with. People call you the nice one. What nobody tells you is that niceness has a price, and you have been paying it for years without noticing. Somewhere along the way, being agreeable stopped being a choice. It became a role you play every single day, in every room you walk into. And here is the strange part. The nicer you become, the less people seem to actually see you. This is not a video about becoming rude. This is a video about a quiet trade you made a long time ago, a trade you probably do not remember making, and what it has cost you since. Psychologists distinguish between two things that look the same from the outside but are completely different underneath. One is kindness. The other is people-pleasing. And here is the part that will surprise you. Most nice people cannot actually tell which one they are running on. Kindness comes from abundance. You help because you have something to give, and giving it does not cost you your sense of self. You could say no, and you would still feel like yourself. People-pleasing comes from fear. You help because saying no feels dangerous, because disappointing someone feels like a small death, because your value has quietly become tied to how useful you are to others. Take away the helping, and something underneath starts to feel unstable. Ask yourself one question right now. The next time someone asks you for a favor, imagine saying no. Not politely declining with an excuse. Just no. If that single word makes your chest tighten before you have even said it out loud, you already have your answer. This pattern rarely begins in adulthood. It is built early, usually in a home where love felt conditional in ways too subtle to name at the time. A child learns fast. If calm gets rewarded and anger gets punished, the child stops expressing anger. If agreement gets approval and disagreement gets met with silence or withdrawal, the child stops disagreeing. Not because anyone sat the child down and explained the rule. Children do not need the rule explained. They calculate it from 1,000 tiny moments, a raised eyebrow, a longer pause before a hug, a mood in the room that only shifts once they smooth things over. By the time that child becomes an adult, the strategy is no longer a strategy. It is identity. They do not think of themselves as someone who is afraid of conflict. They think of themselves as a nice person, full stop, and the fear underneath it becomes invisible even to them. This is the part that makes it so hard to catch. You cannot easily question a trait you believe is simply who you are. Here is the part that stings. A person who has built their identity around being nice is often terrified of one thing above all else: being disliked. So they say yes when they mean no. They apologize for things that are not their fault, sometimes several times a day, for things as small as walking too slowly or asking a question. They laugh at jokes that actually hurt them. They absorb other people's bad moods and quietly call it being understanding, when really it is just another form of shrinking. Every one of these moments feels small in isolation. A single yes. A single apology. A single swallowed opinion. But small moments, repeated for years, build a person who has almost no idea what they actually want, because they have spent so long optimizing for what other people want instead. Ask a chronic people-pleaser what their favorite restaurant is, and watch how long it takes them to answer. Often the honest response is, "I do not know, I usually just go along with whatever everyone else wants. That is not a small quirk. That is a person slowly losing access to their own preferences. Here is where it gets counterintuitive, and this is the part most people never expect. The world does not reward chronic niceness the way you would think. People do not treat the nicest person in the room with the most respect. Often, they treat them with the least. Why would that be true? Because on some level, everyone can sense who will not push back. It is not usually conscious or cruel. It is simply efficient. People, without meaning to, sort the room into those who have limits and those who do not, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. The coworker who always covers the extra shift becomes the default person asked to cover it. The friend who always drives, always listens, always shows up, is rarely the one asked how they are doing in return, because the group has quietly assigned them the role of the strong one, the steady one, the one who does not need anything. The partner who keeps the peace so consistently that their own needs simply stop being part of the conversation, not because their partner is a villain, but because nobody ever had to negotiate with them. Kindness that has no boundary attached to it does not get admired. It gets consumed. Not maliciously. Just efficiently, the way water finds the lowest point without anyone deciding it should. Here is what almost never gets talked about. Chronic niceness does not eliminate anger. It just buries it somewhere the nice person themselves cannot easily find. The anger has to go somewhere, and it usually goes inward. It shows up as exhaustion that sleep does not fix, a tiredness that has nothing to do with how many hours you slept. It shows up as a strange bitterness that surfaces at odd moments, over something small and seemingly unrelated, because the real reason has been suppressed for so long it can no longer be named directly. It shows up as a persistent, low hum of resentment toward people who, from the outside, the nice person insists they love. This is the cruelest part of the trade. You give and give in order to be loved, and somewhere underneath it, without ever choosing to, you start quietly resenting the very people you gave to. Not because they demanded it. Because you never told them you had a limit, and they had no way of knowing where it was. Over time, something even stranger happens. The nice person starts to disappear. Not physically. Socially. People stop asking their opinion, not out of unkindness, but because everyone has quietly learned that the answer will simply match whatever the group already wants. People stop checking on them emotionally, because they seem fine, they are always fine, that is the whole brand they have built without meaning to. A person who spends a decade agreeing with everyone eventually becomes a person that nobody actually knows, including, often, themselves. Here is a question worth sitting with. Think of the people closest to you. Could they tell you, right now, what genuinely upsets you? Not what you complain about, but what actually hurts. If the honest answer is no, that is not because you are private. It is because being needed and being known are two entirely different things, and most chronic people pleasers have quietly confused one for the other for most of their lives. The shift, when it finally happens, rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It usually starts with one small no. A boundary that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Declining a request without an elaborate excuse attached. Leaving a conversation before it turns into another hour of managing someone else's feelings. What happens next is the real test, and it is the part nobody warns you about. Some people in the nice person's life will be completely fine with it, and their relationship will not change at all. But some people will react badly, sometimes surprisingly badly, because the whole relationship was quietly built on the assumption that this person would never push back. That reaction is not proof that the boundary was wrong. It is proof that it was overdue. And here is the uncomfortable truth hiding inside that discomfort. Any relationship that only survives because you never say no was never as solid as it looked. The goal here was never to become unkind. It is to separate kindness from fear. Two things that have been fused together for so long they started to feel like one instinct. Real kindness can say no. Real kindness can disagree without apologizing for existing. Real kindness protects itself first, The same way a person has to secure their own oxygen mask before helping someone else with theirs, because a kindness that runs entirely on self-sacrifice eventually runs out completely, at the exact moment someone needs it most. This is not selfishness. It is the only version of kindness sustainable enough to actually last a lifetime instead of quietly burning out somewhere in the middle of it. The people who benefit most from this shift are usually not strangers. They are the people closest to the nice person, because for the first time, those relationships get to be built on something real instead of something managed. So here is the question worth sitting with, the one this entire video has been circling around from the very first story. If you stripped away the fear of disappointing people, if being disliked for a single afternoon genuinely cost you nothing at all, would you still make all the same choices you are making right now? If the honest answer is no, you already know what the nice version of yourself has actually been protecting this whole time. Not other people. Just the fear of losing them. Remember the two coworkers from the beginning of this video. The nice one and the difficult one. The difference between them was never talent, and it was never actually kindness. It was whether their kindness came with a limit attached. The price of being too nice is not that people take advantage of you. It is that you slowly forget you were ever allowed to take up space in the first place.